Hi, welcome to the Future Spotlight webinar for April 2026. Much to talk about today, so we will proceed without any further ado. I have titled this Microsoft Changes Things because Microsoft this week said basically that they're altering Azure and pray that they do not alter it any further. I'm not saying that Microsoft is acting like Darth Vader. I'm just saying that they're altering the deal with the way that Microsoft Azure and Intro works. This has forced some changes on our side for the products, which we'll discuss. There are also some additional upcoming enhancements and some bug fixes that we tackled. But to start, let's discuss Microsoft and what they've been doing. This month, Microsoft has done a couple of things that alters the way Intro works and alters the way that you have to authenticate with Intra under certain circumstances. They've also now disabled, I think legacy SharePoint connectors at this point are completely dead. Site connectors that use SharePoint OAuth, I know that some of them have already been disconnected. I don't know that all of them have been, but Microsoft did announce that in April they would be disabling site connections via OAuth. Also, the previously used method of getting files up to SharePoint through your OAuth connection, that has been changed so that the file size for any file that you send to SharePoint is now limited to 2 megabytes. They also decided that CertRec, the free certificate creation utility that is provided and has been provided with every version of Windows for as long as I can remember, is no longer good enough for generating certificates to be used with not Active Directory, but Intra and Azure. So, therefore, when you create a certificate, your only choice now is to use PowerShell to create the certificate that you need to build an Azure app so that you can connect Process Director as an Azure app in the system. So you can't use CertRec anymore. All certificates at this point in time, all certificates have to be created via PowerShell. And it's a special PowerShell deal. We'll talk about that in a bit. Also, if you want to use multi-factor authentication for people to access their email, they have a new API. It is called Microsoft Graph. I'm not entirely sure why we're using Microsoft Graph for this, but we are. It is called I believe it's called Client Credentials Flow, which is different than their old authentication. The old authentication for OAuth still works, but only the Microsoft Graph API enables you to use MFA for any SMTP authentication. So that means we've had to add a new authentication type there for that. This requires updates to both the product and to the custom tasks. So yesterday, we released version 6.1.506. That version does contain the Microsoft Graph API. In fact, let's take a quick look at that. We also updated the new customs task package because there had to be changes to push files to SharePoint, which we'll talk about in a second. For right now, the authentication types, as you know, we added Microsoft 365 OAuth for Azure and Intra, and it says Office 365. Of course, it's now been renamed to Microsoft 365. So we added that. We also added Google OAuth, and in 5.06, we have added the Microsoft Graph API. We already have one customer that wanted to implement MFA on their SMTP. So we did create the Microsoft Graph API connection. We set that up so that, and we installed 5.06 on their system so that they can access their email, their SMTP email through the Microsoft Graph API. Now, the Microsoft Graph API is a little different, in fact, a bit counterintuitive. In Microsoft Office, the normal Office 365 Microsoft OAuth, you still have the ability to use a SMTP user ID and password if you want. Microsoft Graph works differently. On the end user side, it does require MFA. However, on our side, it does not require a username or password. It does only require the tenant, client ID, and SMTP secret to use the Microsoft Graph API. Now, my understanding is that currently, if you're using Office 365 / Microsoft OAuth, you're fine for now. If you were to go to the Microsoft Graph API, whether or not you're using SMTP MFA for your end users, even if you're not using that, I believe you can go to the Microsoft Graph API and use that as your primary login. It does use a different credentials flow. There is a little explanation for it if you actually wanted to go to the support site. We'll just go there real fast and we'll look at the announcement for 5.06. So you can see that is the big thing on 5.06. Most of 5.06 is, well, it's bug patch. Well, it's not even really a bug patch release. It really is a release for this. This is the only enhancement to 5.06. However, we are aware of the deadline that is looming for many higher ed customers who are going to need to be WCAG Level 2A compliant by the end of this month. I believe April 24th is the deadline. We're still working on that. This release has some accessibility fixes as well. So we're kind of releasing stuff under deadline here to both meet those accessibility requirements and to meet this new requirement for being able to support SMTP with MFA for end users. And so this Microsoft Graph API, it's called Client Credentials Flow. That is the new service. The old service, I forget the name of it, but it was just Microsoft's standard OAuth. So this is a different service, and it is a more capable service than the original OAuth. So that has been a big change. Now, part of these changes, as I mentioned earlier, were some of the custom tasks. So we have had to make updates to the push files to SharePoint custom task to make to overcome that limitation I first talked about here, that file size limit update to 2 megabytes. We obviously want to be able to get past that, so we've changed push files to SharePoint. That's kind of a temporary fix because we are also going to make some changes inside the product to make that push files to SharePoint fix unnecessary, but we did make that fix to the CT so that you can get past that new 2 megabyte file upload limit for Azure. If you are, well, you've probably already noticed, and I know that several of you have noticed because it has been a busy week being informed about these site connections just going offline. So if you are using SharePoint and you have not yet checked any of your SharePoint connectors, I would urge you to do so to be sure that they work. And if they don't work, and I don't think any of your legacy connectors are going to work at all, I think Microsoft has just killed that. If your site connector still works, okay, but Microsoft has said that they are going to be disabling site level OAuth connections this month. So it may not work by the end of the month. So uh, do whatever you think will be required to get past those issues. So that has been the big change this month, and that is the headline news. But it's not the only news that we have, because we have added a bunch of other new enhancements into the product. Most of them will probably be part of 6.2 rather than a new .50x release. Now, there may be another .50x release that will largely be of interest to our higher ed customers, because it will probably have some additional accessibility fixes. I think there might be one or two accessibility tweaks that are still out there. We've been working hard on accessibility, and I think we're pretty much WCAG level 2A compliant for the end users. But what we're running into is some users who are using some unusual configurations on some of the form fields. And some of the form fields, like one was the radio button list. It worked fine if you just used the normal radio button list. But if you changed, I believe if you changed it to horizontal alignment, it was missing some of the required accessibility elements on the output HTML. So there's probably a couple of little glitches somewhere in there, but I think we have largely fixed that. And while there are a couple of outstanding that I think we'll probably have to have another update prior to the 24th of April, I think we can look forward to 6.2, most likely being our next real release of the product. And it will contain several things. If you have a show attach control, there are now new properties or new formatters for a show attach control specifically. The URL underscore edit and URL underscore review. This is largely applicable to customers who use either collaborative document authoring or collaborative document markup. These would be the URLs that a user could click on and could go straight to the edit in the case of CDA, or the review in the case of CDM, to either edit or annotate documents. So those are there. The data list control, we've made a change there. And by the way, there's so much to talk about. I'm just not going to have the time to give you demos of most of this stuff, so I apologize ahead of time. You'll just have to listen to me drone on without seeing cool stuff in the UI. But the data list control, we decided to implement a little quality of life improvement on that control, so that if you go into the filter and you hit enter at any time, it will automatically do a contains search. Prior to this, you would actually have to go into the filter box, put in your value, and then you would have to go to the drop-down menu and actually select contains as your filter before it would run the search. Now it'll just run the search, a contain search automatically. So you can type part of a name and just hit enter, and a contain search will run automatically. You won't have to then leave the keyboard, go back to your mouse, and pick the filter that you want from the drop-down. There is an important change on user types. Now, you're going to have to be super careful about how you do this. But in user administration, when you pick a user, so let's pick Barb, way over here on the far right, you can change the user type. I would strongly urge you not to go crazy with going in and changing user types like this. You can, but you do need to be aware that changing user types changes a lot of stuff in the back end. For example, if you're bringing stuff in from Active Directory or LDAP, or you have a SAML system set up, there are some implications that are rather too complex for me to go into here, but you do now have the capability for changing a user's type. I would think that most of the time it would be to take a user and switch them to a built-in user from either Windows or LDAP or SAML. And of course, if you do that and make them a built-in user, you remove them from sort of SAML or LDAP synchronization. So it is a little complex, but it is something that people have asked for because there are circumstances where you do actually want to switch a user type. As I said, there's a lot of implications for how this works with, AD/intra synchronization and whatnot, but that capacity is now available to you. On the tab strip control, we've now got some items that enable you, we've got some checkboxes that enable you to specify whether a tab, whenever you print a form, whether the tab should be printed or whether it should be ignored from printing. We had a customer ask for that, so we've added that. Also in Bootstrap, we've kind of fixed up the one of the missing items for the responsive layout controls. There was a nav control in the responsive layout controls, which is great, except there was no way to put anything in it because there was no nav item control. So we have added a nav item control. So you can use the responsive layout controls to actually build the navigation bar and to put the appropriate navigation items in it. Something that people have asked for a long time, but that is a bit of a technical lift, especially to do in the UI, is to be able to save a form without closing the form. Normally, a form doesn't really get saved until the form is submitted. Now, saving a form and closing it is actually submitting a form. What we're doing in the background is we're saying this is still a draft, and so we're setting a different marker on the form to let us know that it is not actually submitted. But in general, when you fill stuff out on your browser, that doesn't go into the system until you submit the form. And that's why the save button is, if you want it to show up on a new form instance, if you click the save button, you're going to have to close the form instance. That form needs to be submitted. On the SDK side, it's not as hard to do. So we have created a new method in the forms class of the SDK called save as draft. And what that will do is save your form data in a new form instance without having to close the form. Now, it is going to require custom scripting. And so you're going to have to attach custom script to a save button to call the save as draft. So understand that that is not as convenient as just plopping a save button down. However, that's the way that we felt was the best way to implement it without having to go in and start tearing the guts out of how things work on the front end in the UI. So save as draft now exists. There is a new data source type. It is called the AI data source. So let's go actually back to there, not to the other place we were looking at. So let's go into the content list real quick because I think this is where I built it. And let's go into data sources and go to test. And I now have an AI data source type. It's not much to configure here other than the connection parameters, which is generally either a JSON, usually JSON, but I suppose with some models it might be XML, where you set up all of your connection parameters. So you would actually have to get the JSON from your AI provider, and then you would have to paste that JSON here, but it provides the connection for your AI. So technically, you could use your own AI system to create your own chatbot that used your own AI system if you wanted to. I've already mentioned there are new versions of custom tasks. I did mention push files to SharePoint, but we've also changed item actions. We've changed email actions. We've changed email import. There have been several custom tasks that have been updated over the past few weeks or over the past month. And so part of the release yesterday was also to package up the most updated version of all of the custom tasks and have those available to you. So if you have not updated your custom tasks in a while, this might be a good time to update your custom tasks. There is a new control. It's a color picker control. It's pretty simple. It just allows you to pick a color. It's available now in the UI. Let's see, I'm sure I have a test form here. If nothing else, I should have the test form that I'm using for Apruvia. Although I don't really want to mess that form up, I guess I can at least play around with it a little bit in terms of dropping in, and I'll drop it right down here. It is on other controls, and it is color picker is what I'm looking for. And maybe it is not under other controls. Where is it? Oh, there it is. It's under input controls. It's the color picker. And at runtime, it just provides a color picker drop down. It gives you several different methods for choosing different colors. So it's a pretty cool little control. So it is the color picker control, and it is under input controls. So you can drop a color picker on your form. I, on the other hand, I'm going to get out of that form without saving it because I'm actually using that form at the moment. We've implemented some security improvements. As usual, I'm not going to tell you what those security improvements are for obvious reasons, but we're working in the background to implement security improvements and updates as things go. We have updated the way PDF conversion works. There is a known bug in PowerPoint. Apparently, PowerPoint wants to stick in some SVG metadata tags, and it makes the conversion to PDF go all wonky. So Expose released a new version of their PDF conversion library. We've updated that library in the product, and so that should correct this known PowerPoint bug so that those SVG metadata tags don't cause things to fail anymore. Finally, we can move to bug fixes. CSS and display issues have been fixed. That's also been part of the accessibility fixes that we're doing to meet level 2A compliance. So these two things here kind of go hand in hand, but in addition to just accessibility stuff, there was some wonkiness with the way that desktop workspaces were displaying and some various CSS and display issues elsewhere. Little things in the content list. I think one of them was forms were showing up as folders rather than as forms. Everything worked, but you weren't seeing the form icon there. There were a couple of Oracle specific issues that we had to fix. Most of you do not use Oracle, so it wouldn't be really relevant to you, but there's been some minor changes in Oracle, as well as some things in the product that needed to be updated to work with Oracle better. I did mention the content list, the form showing up as folders. There were also some other issues, the content list occasionally collapsing unexpectedly. I think some of this is a result of the way that we've had to implement a feature that we call lazy loading in the content list. Some of you have content lists with 50,000 or more items in the content list. And so rather than trying to load the entire content list all at one time the way that we used to, for more than 50,000 content list items, we now load on demand. That is a much more complex method of loading it, and we're still running into little glitches here and there that people find after and it's been now a couple of months, and occasionally we still find these little issues. So we're addressing them as they come up, along with some unexpected error banners. Most of the time, these unexpected error banners are they don't really affect anything. You shouldn't even be seeing them, and notably everything like generally works. Like you would upload, or you would open a timeline instance and you would see this error banner that said unexpected server error, and then it would disappear and everything would work. But we don't want you to see the banner if you shouldn't be seeing the banner. So we've done some work to get rid of that. The attached document custom task was, for some reason, and this is odd because I don't think we've changed that custom task. And it may be something that was in the product. I don't remember where the actual issue was, but it was adding duplicate attachments. So you would add a document and it would add two. I think those of you who go to the training webinar might have actually seen that happen live the last time I looked at the attached document custom task, which was just 3 or 4 weeks ago. But that has been corrected now. There's and I don't remember whether that was a correction to the custom task itself or whether that was a correction in the product. But whatever it was fixed. The import users custom task. There was an issue where if you were pulling in a custom string and it had leading zeros, we were treating it as a number, not as a string. And so the leading zeros were just getting eliminated because numbers don't have leading zeros. Of course, the custom string property is in fact a string, not a number. So even if you are using numbers, it's not really a number field. So it was basically just an import / conversion error where at some point those leading zeros got stripped. Those are now preserved for custom strings. And finally, the routing slip. There was an issue with the routing slip where if you went in and changed the sub-process properties, if you're familiar with the routing slip, there are a couple of properties that you can check to either turn on or turn off tracking of sub-processes. Those settings weren't being respected, so we did make that fix so that whether you turn on or off sub-process tracking inside a routing slip, that setting will be respected now. And with that, that is all I have for you today. So as always, thanks for joining me on the Spotlight webinar. I will look forward to speaking with you next month. For those of you who attend the training webinar, I'll speak with you later this week. Have a great month. We'll talk to you next month. So long.